welcome back to EDH Deck Building. I am your host, Demo, and these are 5 cards that I think should see a little more play in the Commander format. Just some suggestions for cards that I'm sure are not entirely unfamiliar to people, but I'd like to point out that they should probably see more play than they do, based almost entirely on what your Commander is doing. In fact, this episode is going to be entirely just cards that fit with specific commanders depending on what they're doing, and obviously in the color scheme that we're looking for, right? So for example, we're going to start out with Pan-Glacial Worm. 5 green worm, 9/5 with trample. While you're searching your library, you may cast Pan-Glacial Worm from your library. One of the most interesting, unique abilities I've ever seen on a card. There is no other card that does this, obviously. In fact, this is so unique, I actually built an entire deck around it on my Janky Deck series. You can go check that out if you want to. And of course, when I was doing so, I used a commander that was searching the library over and over again. That's what you need with a card like that. I used Kodama of the West Tree, which has a repeatable search ability. And I just think this is a card that you could include in any deck, of course, that's green, that has any searching at all. There are 15 commanders in the commander format that are green that are doing some form of searching. And this just allows you free value. I think later in a game, I search my library for any reason at all, and now I can just chuck a 9/5 trample creature into play. Of course, I got to pay the 7 mana, but I probably have lots of mana lying around later in a game anyway. So for me, this is a card that you could just very easily chuck in any deck that has a commander that is searching, and it's just a nice big body that you can chuck into play to help you close out the game. Coming in at number 4, we got Knotvine Mystic, red, green, and a white elf druid 2/2. Pay 1 and tap, add red, green, and a white to your mana pool. So this is just a mana dork. I know it doesn't seem like much, right? But this is a mana dork that I think should see a lot more play in the format. Doesn't really see much at all. Only in about 2,000 decks on EDH Rec. Now, obviously, you could throw this in any deck that is Naya. Any Naya deck will love this guy. It's a mana fixer, right? Not only is it a mana dork, so I'm turning my 1 mana into 3 mana, so this guy gives you 2 mana. It's a mana dork that taps for 2 mana, but more importantly, it's giving you exactly the colors you need, right? It's turning any 1 mana that you might have into Naya colors, which is what you're going to need to cast anything in your deck, including your commander. And so not only is it a good mana dork, it's also a fantastic mana fixer. And if you have a commander, like say for example, Mael of the Anima, which has an ability that requires those 3 colors, it's just an easy way to ensure that you have them, right? I don't have to worry so much about making sure I have the red, green, and the white. All I have to make sure is I have a mana to activate my Knotvine Mystic. As long as that's in play, it guarantees I have the mana I need. If maybe you have a commander that you're going to be casting a lot, like a Rocco, Cabaret Caterer, there's a commander that you're probably going to be casting over and over and over again, and this is going to make sure you have the Naya colors available to be repeatedly casting your commander. So this is just a good mana dork, but also a great way to ensure you have the Naya colors that you need to be doing whatever you want in your deck. Next up, we got Break Through the Line. 1 on a red enchantment. Pay a red. Target creature with power 2 or less gains haste until end of turn and can't be blocked this turn. This is just an absolute go-to for me. It has been for a long time. Way back in the day, I was making a Tana deck. I actually made quite a few Tana decks in my day, probably about 4 or 5 different partner pairings with Tana. And I came across this card, which I just thought was a phenomenal fit with her because of course she's got a power 2 or less and also wants to be attacking and getting in for damage. So what a phenomenal fit in any Tana deck, because not only can I give it haste to let it attack right away, but I'm guaranteed to get in for damage so I can get that damage trigger. And this has just been a go-to. I just go back to it every time I'm doing any commander like that, whether it be for myself or one of my patrons on my Patreon that I'm making a deck for, or any of my decks I make on my channel. There are 23 commanders in the format that are red, that have a power 2 or less, that want to be attacking, that have some sort of an attack trigger. That's quite a bit. And this is a fantastic fit there because of course you're going to give it haste so it can attack right away, but also you don't have to worry about it getting blocked, right? There's a lot of commanders that you want that attack trigger, but your opponent could just block your commander and then it might die in combat, right? And you don't want that either. There are also 7 commanders that are power 2 or less that want to be getting in for damage. So it fits in all those decks as well. So we got 30 commanders. And again, I'm not even talking about all the strategies where this fits, just the commanders. There are 30 from what I found where Break Through the Line is a fantastic fit. Coming in at number 2, General's Enforcer. White and a black human soldier 2/3. Legendary humans you control have indestructible. That seems pretty good. 2 white and a black. Exile target card from a graveyard. If it was a creature card, create a 1/1 white human soldier creature token. So this is a really fantastic card. And again, this is exactly why I make this series. This is a card that people are going to see and they're going to go, oh, I know that card exists. I'm not saying anything that people haven't heard before. Everyone knows this card exists. I just don't think they're using it as much as they should be because they might not even realize that their commander is a human. It's one of those things that you don't really think about a lot of times when you build a deck unless you're actually in a tribal theme, right? If you're in a tribal theme, obviously you're going to think of this. But if you're not in a tribal theme, you're not going to be thinking, hey, my commander is a legendary human that's in white and black, and it's going to be pretty nice to make it indestructible. Now, that second ability is also pretty great, right? You can make soldier tokens, human soldier tokens actually, so it is going to fit in maybe a human or soldier theme. It's also graveyard hate, which is fantastic to have always in a commander deck. But if we're just looking at that first ability, legendary humans having indestructible, and again, I'm just looking at the commanders, right? I just want to make my commander indestructible, and we've gotten quite a few of them lately. Just white, black, human commanders, there are 18. That's a lot, right? It's actually way more than I thought, and probably a few that you never would have thought to put this guy in the deck, right? Like Killian Ink Duelist, for example. How many people have General's Enforcer in their Killian Ink Duelist deck? It's not really doing anything that you're doing in the deck. However, making your commander indestructible could be pretty nice. How about a Teysa Karlov deck, right? How many people out there have General's Enforcer in their Teysa Karlov deck? How about Queen Marchesa, right? There's a human commander that is white and black. Seems like a pretty good one to be making indestructible. How about Alicia, who smiles at death? That seems like a fantastic fit for this card. How many people have General's Enforcer in their Alicia deck? You could actually get it out of your graveyard with your Alicia, makes your Alicia indestructible. There's a commander, again, that wants to be attacking all the time, and you don't have to worry about it getting blocked and dying. If it's indestructible, that solves that problem. Do you have General's Enforcer in your Alicia deck? I think it's a great fit. So yes, this is a card that everyone probably knows exists, but probably haven't thought, hey, wait a minute, my commander is a legendary human. It would be really nice to make it indestructible. But coming in at number 1 this time is Abjure. 1 blue mana instant. As an additional cost to cast this spell, sacrifice a blue permanent, counter target spell. I think this is one of the best counter spells in the format and one of the most underrated in my opinion. I guess the sacrifice blue permanent is a little bit of a turnoff for people. This is a 1 mana hard counter spell, guys. There is no stipulation here other than the sacrificing. It just counters any spell for 1 blue mana. That's terrific. I have this in my Danik deck where it's a fantastic fit because I want to be sacrificing my commander. Of course, my commander is a blue permanent. I can use this to sacrifice my commander, so it becomes sort of a sack outlet for me. Also, I am in a little bit of a sacking recursion theme. I want my creatures to be dying and go to the graveyard because then I get to trigger off my commander. So if I have a blue creature in play, I can sacrifice my creature to Abjure and then I get to trigger off my commander. Where I think this is absolutely a must though is in any deck where you're creating tokens. That's where I think this card should definitely see more play. There is 17 commanders in the format that are blue that are creating tokens, and of course most of them are creating tokens repeatedly, right? They're just spitting out tokens all the darn time, and it is very easy to slot this in your deck. Just think about an Alila Artful Provocateur deck, very popular commander in the format obviously. You're just constantly spitting out those 1/1 blue fairy creature tokens. This just becomes a 1 mana hard counter spell. Sacrifice one of your fairies too? Oh well, I'm sure that's not much of a downside for you, right? Seems like a great fit in a Coma Cosmos Serpent deck where you're constantly spitting out those 3/3 blue serpent creature tokens. Phenomenal fit in that Locust God deck where you're constantly spitting out those 1/1 blue and red insect creature tokens that I'm sure you wouldn't mind sacrificing one to counter a board wipe or an expropriate or something, right? Phenomenal fit fit in that Maluku the Clouded Mirror deck. Fantastic commander that I just talked about in my Commanders I Can't Believe Are So Unpopular video, and making 1/1 blue illusion creature tokens that you can very easily use to help cast your Abjure. This is a fantastic counterspell, I think. In general, I think this is a great counterspell in the format that could probably see more play, but in a deck where you have lots of little blue tokens lying around, it's an absolute auto-include in my opinion. Definitely needs to see more play. But that is it for today. 5 more cards that I think should probably see more play in the format. Just making you think about, does this maybe fit with my commander? Haven't really thought about it in this deck because maybe it doesn't necessarily fit the theme of what I'm doing, but it really does fit with what my commander is doing. Are any of these cards going to fit in those decks that you already have? I think they probably will. And if you are thinking of purchasing any of these cards, I have a TCG Player link. It is in the description below. Give it a click. It helps support the channel. But that is it for today. And thanks for tuning in.